at the word, I think I'll put up what we've done. We looked at storge. We looked at some derivatives. Storge is not found in the New Testament. We looked at ostergos. What was the other one we looked at? Philostorgos. Storge is not found. It's the chief word for this first category here. Is not found in the New Testament. Remember, this is natural or family love. And then this is just the negative of it. And this last word is just very similar back to our first one. It just has the phileo term. It's a compound word. It's got the philos, the phileo term. And it's got the storge term as well. We found only 3 places where we have any concern for these 2 words, Romans 1:31 and 2 Timothy 3:3 for ostergos. Without natural affection, the KJV says. NASB says unloving, NIV says heartless. And philostorgos in Romans 12:10, which is what we should have for one another. Then we come this evening then to a second, we're just going to call it our second word, since these are just derivatives of the other. Now, that's a very famous word from ancient Greek. Eros. E-R-O-S. Eros. Little god with the bow and the arrow, remember, went by this name. We get words like erotic, eroticism from this Greek term, eros. Now, here's where we're going to obviously start taking a few pot shots at the lay teachers out there because of a misconception of this term, especially of the origin of this term, and therefore, as a result, we, and not just little lay teachers out there, but the American public in general, the Christian American public in general, or even the American public in general that uses terms like erotic or eroticism, that go back to this word, have really picked up something that didn't come with the word originally, but that came with the word later on. The word, it's a love term. We're just looking at love terms here. The word means romantic love. It came later in history to have sexual overtones. But it was never, in its original context, ever found just to have reference to the sex act or to the naughty negatives that we think of with the term erotic and eroticism. That's all we hear with the way we use the word today, erotic and eroticism. That's all we hear in too many Christian teachings if they go through the little 3 Greek words, the phileo, the eros, and the agapao terms. That's all we hear is that somehow the word is a dirty word. The concept is a dirty concept. But it's just not. Romantic love can be a very beautiful form of love. And that's a different form of love than familial love. You see, they have different terms. And that's what's better about Greek than English. We just say love. I love my spouse, and I love my child, and I love my neighbor, and I love my Christian friends. The same term all the time. Where the Greeks had it divided up depending on what you were talking about there. What type of love is it? That's why I've said before, you can't express love as we think of love toward inanimate objects, and yet we use the word love anyway. And you should use a term like instead of love. And there we've got 2 different words. Well, they had more than 2 different words to express different types of still love, though. Romantic love, okay, there's between a man and a woman. Familial love, that could be between a parent and a child. And neither one of these, you see, come into play whenever we're talking about God's love, because he's not just a father, he's God. He's got a higher type of love than just a father's love, And we certainly wouldn't classify his love as romantic love for the Son, the Spirit, or for any of his children. So I've already told you something in advance. This term's never found in the New Testament. I don't know why it's taught on so much. I guess just because you get on a couple of Greek words, phileo and agapao, then you just want to jump into one more, eros, even though it's not found in the Bible. Now the other two are, but not eros. So that's what I want you to make a big note of in your mind right away, so that you know something that a lot of people don't know about the eros, the erotic, the eroticism term. And the basis for these two latter terms is that there's nothing unclean, there's nothing dirty, there's nothing wrong with the term at all in its original context. Nothing. It came to have sexual overtones later. It began just as a romantic term. Now, I'm not saying that it's as good of a word or concept as the phileo terms, many phileo compounds, or as the agapao words. I don't mean that at all. As a matter of fact, we'll be saying just the opposite. Those terms are found in the New Testament. The eros term is not found anywhere in the New Testament. Why? Probably because of how it later came to have, and it had by the New Testament time, probably because it came to have sexual overtones to it. And therefore it was not thought fitting to use that. It could have fit over in Ephesians 5, husbands, love your wives, if we're going to just think of the romantic side of it. But after all, romantic love can only be expressed in certain times and towards certain people. So that must not be the highest form of love. You can't be romantically in love with everyone. Probably it's only one person that you're romantically in love with, and probably even then, it's only sometimes that you're romantically in love with them. And is that something willed and deliberate? No, that's the falling in type of right there. That's not willed and deliberate as our definition. So we must be talking about another Greek term and another concept as well, if we're going to talk about willed and deliberate love. Romantic love, you know, that comes and goes as the seasons change, the anniversaries come, and the flowers come. That just comes and goes, depending on other circumstances. Whereas a certain type of love, the highest love, what we've just defined as L-O-V-E, our English term, not a Greek term yet, it goes much, much beyond this. Now, there are two characteristics. I found this to be very interesting in studying this term. There are two characteristics that almost always are seen and almost always together with eros love. Sometimes you'll hear it eros, but it really has a long O in it, eros. And here's probably another reason for why the word is not used in Christianity. First of all, I said because it came to have sexual meanings. And you could even put in, then secondly, romantic love is not the best form of love. But then thirdly, or really under the secondly, we'll see some characteristics. And you see if these characteristics don't describe romantic love, and they describe what can be so wrong with romantic love. Now everyone's listening. What's wrong with romantic love? Well, it's not the highest form of love. You ought to know already in our teachings thus far what love is, and romantic love does not fit the definition, does not fit that bill at all. It can be good, but there are things that are wrong about it. Let's say that you can have romantic love that can be good, that can be expressed in the right way, when you've got the other type of love, the love that we've already defined just with the English love, L-O-V-E, when you've got that to go along with it. When you don't, then you'll see how this will degenerate. And you already know, probably from experience, how quickly romantic love can degenerate into just nothing at all. It can degenerate into hatred. It's what it can degenerate into. Love can degenerate into hatred if it's romantic love. If it's biblical love, of course, it won't degenerate. It'll just continue to grow. Here are two characteristics. First of all, and this can just be proven, and I'm going to give you some references from Plato to prove it, but it can be proven from many, many different places that these characteristics almost always both come together whenever you see this term eros used. First of all, eros is almost always love of the worthy. Eros is almost always love of the worthy. I'll put romantic over here to keep everything in your mind. It is almost always love of the worthy. Okay, now you see what this does. The biblical view of love would just shoot this into outer space then. One thing that we are not in God's eyes is worthy. And therefore, if the only type of love he has, and he doesn't have romantic love, that's never ever used of God in the Bible. He never is that used of God. If that's all God has, then the only beings that he could love would be the Son and the Spirit. Not even the angels. The angels aren't worthy. Therefore, we'd never be a recipient of God's love. It's always either love of what is worthy or what you, at least in your opinion, think is worthy. Now, because worthy is a relative word. I've just said none of us are worthy. What about whenever you express eros? Later, it comes to have the sexual overtones to it. Better even put that in there. Not always, it's sad to say, it's probably true of everybody though, not always is that which you think that is worthy is so worthy after all. Have you ever heard someone ask this type of question? What in the world does he see in her? He thinks that she's worthy, or you could turn it around the other way. What does she see? And it's generally said with emphasis like this, what does she see in him? It's him. There, this person who's speaking doesn't see anything worthy there. So evidently there must not be anything worthy, love of the worthy. I said love of either what's worthy or what the person in their mind thinks is worthy. Then you express this form of love. Okay, again, you see, not only would it give us problems theologically with God to us, not us to God, God is worthy of our love, but what about with one another? There are too many people, when you look around, you would say people are not worthy then. This person is just not worthy. Therefore, this love, because it's not the highest expression of love, that's, I guess, what I'm saying. It's a very low form of love. There's nothing wrong with it just in the sense of what it is, but it can never fill the definition that we gave you earlier for love. It can never fill the requirements that God has on our life and that God has for himself in the expression of what we in English call love, L-O-V-E. So first of all, it's love of the worthy. Here are some quotations to prove this. Plato in Symposium 201A, capital A. One of these days, we'll all learn all the different ways to write the writings of different writers. Symposium, you know what a symposium? Generally, it's a group of people talking, but it can be something written. Or Plato can be talking and then it's written down. But in Plato's Symposium number 201A, he wrote, and I quote, "Must not eros be only love of beauty and not of ugliness?" End of quote. That's exactly right. He knew what the word meant in his day, and that's exactly what he meant. Must not eros be only love of beauty and not of ugliness? Now you go back to this question that I've heard people say, and I'm sure that you have heard people say, what does he see in her? He sees what he thinks is beauty. You might not think that it's beauty at all. She sees what she thinks is beauty, is something worthy to be loved. You might not see that at all. Now, if you don't see it, then obviously it wouldn't be required of you to express any eros love toward them, because eros love is always love of the worthy. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't be required to express some other form of love, because another form of love is not going to be dependent on whether the object is worthy or not worthy. That's not even going to be under consideration. That is chief and foremost under consideration with eros love. Is the object worthy, or do you at least perceive the object in your mind to be worthy of love? Then if it is, in other words, we're kind of talking about something selfish here then. You're looking for only what is beautiful, only what is good, the best in however you want to describe it, in physical appearance or whatever, is what eros is all about. Hence its connection to romantic and then later sexual love then. Romantic, and then through that it has sexual meanings to it. Love of the worthy. Let's look over in Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 16. While you're turning there, I'll quote Plato again if you didn't get that. Symposium 201a. He wrote, "Must not Eros be only love of beauty and not of ugliness?" Again the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, cause Jerusalem to know her abominations, and say, Thus saith the Lord God unto Jerusalem, Thy birth and thy nativity is of the land of Canaan. Your father was an Amorite. Your mother, she wore army boots. And as for, well, that would be a colloquial, wouldn't it? Thy father was an Amorite, thy mother was an Hittite. That's like saying your mother wears army boots. And as for thy nativity, in the day thou wast born, thy navel was not cut. You know kind of what that looks like, even if it is cut. And especially if it's not, it's even worse then. Just, neither wast thou washed in water to supple thee. Thou wast not salted at all, nor swaddled at all. You heard of swaddling clothes. The babe was lying in a manger in swaddling clothes. And people run to Kmart and try to buy some swaddling clothes. Yeah, people really, they get the strangest misconceptions. Not really from the Bible, just from terminology that you hear as you grow up in church. And you think of swaddling. And I don't doubt that someone has asked a clerk, could I have some where do you keep your swaddling clothes? None I pitied thee to do any of these unto thee, to have compassion upon thee. But you were cast in the open field, to the loathing of thy person in the day that you were born. And when I passed by thee and saw thee polluted in thine own blood, I said unto thee, when thou wast polluted in thy blood, live. Yea, I said unto thee, and here's the third time in this one verse, when thou wast polluted in thy blood, live. Must not Eros be love of beauty and not of ugliness? Well, this is not beauty. This is ugliness here. And God's saying to Israel, didn't I love you anyway in the state in which you were? Was she worthy of God's love? Most definitely not. Are we worthy of God's love? Most definitely not. Are we worthy of God's love, people? No, we're not worthy of it. We're not worthy of the love that He has for us. So thank heaven that God doesn't have this type of love. He would have just picked out the Son and the Spirit and condemned every one and thing to hell, every atom and grain of everything to hell because nothing's worthy. He picks out those that are not worthy and just loves us anyway. I've caused thee to multiply as the bud of the field, and thou hast increased and waxen great. And thou art come to excellent ornaments. Thy breasts are fashioned, thy hair is grown, whereas thou wast naked and bare. And now when I passed by thee and looked upon thee, behold, thy time was the time of love. And I spread my skirt over thee, and covered thy nakedness. Yea, I swear unto thee, and entered into a covenant with thee, saith the Lord God, and thou becamest mine. I washed thee with water, yea, I thoroughly washed away thy blood from thee, and anointed thee with oil. He may have a reference to a different type of blood here, because it seems like birth was under consideration in verse 6 and the verses that are prior to that. Well, he says in verse 4, as for thy nativity, birth. And yet when we get to verse 7, now this child, who was evidently a female child, has grown up, because now it says thy breasts are fashioned and thine hair is grown, whereas thou wast naked and bare. Was a child. That must speak of Israel in captivity in Egypt. And then finally verse 8, now when I passed by thee and looked upon thee, behold, thy time was a time of love. And that was the time of the Exodus, where God took Israel under His shadow, and it was literally under His skirt, under the pillar by day and by night, the cloud and the fire, and then made a covenant with them in Exodus 20 at Mount Sinai. That's probably what he has reference to here. And I spread my skirt over thee, and covered thy nakedness. Yea, I swear unto thee, and entered into a covenant with thee, saith the Lord, and you became mine. I clothed thee also with broidered work, and shod thee with dugong skin, and girded thee with fine linen, and covered thee with silk. I decked thee also with ornaments, and put bracelets upon thy hands, and a chain on thy neck. Now this is all metaphor that he's using. This is all symbolism here. And I put a jewel and earrings and a beautiful crown. Thus wast thou decked with gold and silver, and your raiment was of fine linen and silk and broidered work. Thou didst eat fine flour and honey and oil. Thou wast exceeding beautiful. But see, God was the one. He didn't love her because she was beautiful. He loved her, and his love made her beautiful. And thou didst prosper into a kingdom. Your renown went forth among the heathen, for thy beauty it was perfect through my comeliness, which I had put upon thee, saith the Lord God. But, and then the rest of the chapter goes downhill from there. But you slept with all the other nations, spiritual adultery. By serving gods of other nations, idolatry, you committed adultery in the spiritual sense. Well, you get a beautiful picture of God's relationship to Israel, and you can carry, of course, that over right into your life as the individual Christian, and I guess it's the same thing there. God saw us in our sin and misery, and he put his love upon us, and then anything that we have after that, we owe to him. We better, as the Scriptures warn us, be careful to always walk closely to him, because we'll do as Old Testament Israel did. She turned into a beautiful kingdom, prospered into a kingdom, we're told here. Remember how they came and said, we want a king, and God gave them a king. Moses had foreseen that in Deuteronomy chapter 17. Your renown went forth among the heathen for your beauty, for it was perfect through my comeliness. You know, you've heard, and this is the way that it works. God was not out looking for that which was beautiful, because he would never have found anything if he would have looked for that. He went and found what was not beautiful, and his care and his nurture and his love and his gentleness with Israel turned Israel into a great nation. And that's sometimes what makes the best love story, not when one movie star marries one basketball star, and he's good looking and she's good looking, and they get married. What's so fantastic is when she, this beautiful woman, finds this fella out on the street somewhere, and her love and her concern and her consideration and her all-out devotion, when she could have had anyone besides him. You know what I'm talking about here? It's a beautiful story. There's where you've got something that's worth keeping a hold to there. You don't have this eros love there, because she picked someone who was not worthy. And then all of a sudden he turns into the best man the world could ask for. And why? It was this woman that did that for him. Or you could reverse it, this handsome man that finds this little lonely girl out on the streets, maybe a beggar somewhere, maybe a prostitute out on the streets, a child prostitute. And he takes her in, and it's his love for her that transforms her into a woman that she could never have been without either his love or her love, depending on how we're going to tell the story. It's the same with God and Israel. It's the same with us. It's God when he picks us. And so many of us, well, all of us, some of us worse than others, were a nobody, and somehow it was God's love on us that turned us into something. And guess what? Doesn't the Bible go on to say, not many of the wise and noble does God pick. Not many of the wise and noble, 1 Corinthians 1, does he pick. He picks those that don't have any confidence, timid, afraid, no self-esteem, filled with worry, filled with fear. But whenever he picks them, they end up filled with faith as a result of God's election of them. That comes with it. You have to have faith to receive salvation, and that faith, Ephesians 2, is a gift of God. And then that faith all of a sudden transforms that person in all of those other areas of their life. I don't know how many of you happened to read, I believe it was in yesterday's newspaper, the story about the homeless teenagers there. Oh, I'll tell you, that really ministered to me. I've got some serious thoughts about something along that line. That was a tremendous story in the supplement to yesterday's newspaper. And it's saying exactly, I guess, what we're on. We just happen to be on it, and I wonder why. Exactly what we're on this evening. These people, these runaways, it was telling the story of one young man who had run away when he was 14. The reason he ran away is his father and stepmother both raped him, and then his father beat him whenever he went and tried to tell his father what they did to him, something like that. And he's 20 now, and he's been on his own in the streets since he was 14. You sleep in cars and eat out of trash bins and just find whatever clothes you can find. You have no place to call home. There's not a person in the world that even knows you exist except a few slutty friends like yourself. And then there's not a person in the world that loves you. Wow, I just couldn't believe it. That exists everywhere in the world, but to think that it's so close to us, that not a person in the world loves you, that must be almost more than a human being can bear. Because one of our essential needs, maybe our most essential need besides the need of food and water and air and things like that, is to be loved by someone else. Whenever you're loved, it seems to just transform your life. I was talking with someone the other day. I won't look in their direction. Maybe they've shared the story with someone else, but I'm thinking of someone here in the church. And my view of this person is that they have no self-esteem. They have no self-respect. And I don't say that to criticize. My heart goes out to this person, and that person is here tonight. And I said, and what that person needs, that person is striving for all their worth to be something in life. And what that person needs is someone to love them. And I mean someone special to love them. And you can hardly comprehend unless you think back on the early days of your marriage or something. And maybe it didn't do it to you then. Maybe these teachings will help bring all of this out. What it does to a person when you know that you are the most special person on the planet Earth to one other human being. Maybe to no one else. Probably not, because they've got someone else that's more special than you to them. But you're the most special person on the planet Earth. On the planet Earth. You're the number one person. I hope you can say that about your wife or your husband. They are the number one person on the planet. Would you give up? I hope you wouldn't give up me for them, so I'll put me out of the picture. Let's just put me out of it now. Well, that's false humility, I guess. Would you put anyone out of the picture and keep them there if it came to anyone else? Love is what transformed our life whenever God loved us. I mean, we can't forget of the side of the justification, sanctification side, the legal side to it all. But I mean, God could have changed some records in heaven and told us about it in the Bible, and that doesn't mean we got changed at all, though. See, He didn't just change some records in heaven. He loved us, and that changed our life because He loved us. The same thing is true the same thing can be true in relationships. And again, I guess we're back to marriage relationships. We always get back there for some reason. But I know I told someone else this about the same person not long ago. Probably it's going to work around to that person one of these days. Maybe I'll be talking to them. But I think I know human personality well enough to know that you can tell when someone is craving attention. They want attention from other people. They're just craving attention. You know how children can be whenever they're neglected by their parents. They are the biggest brats, and they don't mean to be brats, but they're just coming around. They can just be anywhere. You can meet them anywhere, and they're wanting to show you this and tell you this, and you just think, shut up. The reason they're doing that is they have no one to listen to them. Amen. No one will listen to them, and they so much need someone else's attention. And you know what? You can find adults like that too. Amen. Who don't get the attention they need from someone else. Maybe it's because they're unmarried. Maybe they're married, but it's their spouse not giving them the attention that they need. They're craving attention. They need attention. They have a poor self-image probably to begin with, because if you had a good self-image, you could probably go a long time without attention and you would be okay. But I don't know, that story really spoke to me. The article in the other day's paper really spoke to me of what the world needs now is love, sweet love. And to go on and finish the story, though, this young man said that he's been out in the streets and he was being interviewed, and he's learned to live on the streets, and he's going to do okay out there. But then the person interviewing him said, but what if you had the opportunity to move into a home with someone where the people really loved you. You get bounced from one foster home to another, just bounced all around. What if someone would take you in that really loved you, and he broke down and said, that's what I want more than anything in the world.
Wow.
But he'll probably never get it, though. He'll never get it. Who knows how to love but a group of people like ourselves here?
Amen.
Who really know how to love. And even for ourselves, it's taking teaching from God's Word to really know how to love. He said, that's what I want more than anything else, is someone to love me. And then he had some girlfriends that were waiting for him, and he said, only reason I go sleep with all the girls around is because that's the only thing that I have to do. But he said, what I want is a relation. That's what he said. What I want is a relationship with someone. Well, you can't have a relationship when you're a runaway. You've been on the street since you're 14. You're white trash is what you are. Life holds nothing for you at all. There's no future for a person like that. They're probably going to end up as an old lady or an old man carrying a bag around in the dead of winter with them somewhere, scrounging out of garbage cans. Boy, it really makes you think of what you have and think of how blessed you are.
Amen.
Even to have nothing, at least you're not out on the streets like that. At least your parents, mine did, maybe yours did. Probably not many parents here in this church have. I mean parents of people here in this church. Just throw you out on the street and say, get out of here. You are worthless. You are an animal. Just get out of here. I hate you. What it must do psychologically to a child. And boy, does that then make you want to love your children even more when you hear stories like that there are children out there. There are thousands and thousands of them that are perishing because they don't have any love. Perishing for attention.
For the
Perishing for attention.
Oh.
We need to do something about that. That's what the church is here for, to do something about things like that. Got to find some way to do something about it. Wouldn't that be beautiful to introduce a person like that into your home, to live with you, to tell them, I love you and I'll love you forever. It just weighs so heavy on your heart. Well, if I had someone like that, and you know what happens is those people, it's so difficult for them to get close to anyone again. It's so difficult for them to trust anyone.
Amen.
That they don't just come in and then they're on such a different wavelength than you're on.
You bet. Amen.
And it's so difficult for them to relate to you. You can relate to them because you can overlook everything, but what's this person up to is what they think. What are they doing now? When am I going to get dumped this time? Moved around this time? When are they going to finally say, listen, I've had it with you, get out of here? Oh, they're probably going to do a few bad things while they're around your place, but would you get up in the middle of the night when they need help somewhere and go try to help them? Especially if you know this is a person that has the potential of being transformed in their life. Especially if you can reach not these 50-year-old people, but one of them was 7 years old. A girl, her father had left her in the dead of winter in a mobile home somewhere, left permanently, no electricity, and put a sack of potatoes on the table for her and said, you just fend for yourself in the dead of winter. That's here in Vermont. 7 years old. What do you do, my Lord? You're 7 years old and you have no parent. Your mother, evidently, she's dead, and your father runs off and says, I'm tired of fooling with you, so you just live or die or whatever you want to do. I'm going to go and have my life. Oh, is God going to judge a country like this that treats its children like that wants to have pleasure instead of wants to have children? I want to do what I want to do, and that's only one child. This child gets in my way from doing what I want to do. They certainly don't count their children as a gift from God, and that's what God says they are. They're a gift. You wouldn't leave a gift to starve. So people like that aren't worthy of love. Therefore, we'd have to have a different type of love than eros love if we would ever be effective in our life in that area. Then a second characteristic of eros love And also we see selfishness shining through in this. Biblical love is selflessness. Selfishness, love of the worthy. You want a handsome husband, you want a beautiful wife, you want what is worthy. Would you be satisfied with something, I can't say less than that, maybe something more than that, but something different, like ugliness instead of beauty? Well, you've heard the old saying, beauty's only skin deep. That type of beauty, there is a higher form of beauty that's internal. It's not external. And that's the highest form of beauty. You can meet beautiful people who are beautiful on the inside, not on the outside. You can meet many flaky, fakey people who are beautiful on the outside, not on the inside. Now, don't try to run around looking like a tramp or a bag lady to prove that you're spiritual. Maybe we ought to just have both of those. Work on the outside so we're a good presentation to others, but more than that, work on the inside so that we can serve God and better serve other people. Plato, again, Symposium 203D. Eros ever dwells with want. W-A-N-T. Why? Because it wants this object. It's a desire to possess. Now, you say, well, isn't there something to this business of possession as far as love is concerned? I mean, God wants to possess us. Well, let's get into that's true, but let's think of it in the person-to-person area, and the brother-to-brother, or the husband-to-wife, or girlfriend-to-boyfriend. Wow. This is not a characteristic of the type of love that we've defined before. You want to possess. Now, to be with is something else. To have a relationship with is something else. But to possess, some people are what we call possessive people. You've heard of a jealous husband before. You can hear of jealous wives as well. They are possessive people. They want this person, and they want no one else to have this person but them. That's possessive love. That's not biblical love at all. That will never work in a relationship. That will never work in a marriage either. Because that desire to possess is what dominates the relationship. And then any notion, and it's just a notion of love, becomes subordinate to that. And I've seen, and I have been in, let me tell you my own experiences. I have been in, I can remember very well, I think I've told you this before, my past relationships with girls back before I was saved in my early teenage years. What it was for me, and I remember it so vividly, was a very possessive form of love. You wanted that girl, and you didn't want anyone else to have her, and you wanted it in the wrong sense. You were jealous of her talking to anyone, or she was jealous of you talking to anyone. That's a very false and a very dangerous form of love, and it's not true biblical love. It's this eros here. It's the desire to possess. That's one of the chief reasons why this term is not going to appear in the New Testament. If it would appear, it would have to appear in the negative. It would have to appear as sin and not as scripturally based love, because of its two characteristics. Love of the worthy, that's not what our love is to be. Love of what is worthy. I think you'll find greater satisfaction. Some people don't think this. They think, if I had the wife or the husband who was the most beautiful, the best, who could do this, that, and the other, oh, I'd just be so satisfied. I don't know, because then what's there to love? Look how good they are. What's there to love there in them?
Yeah.
But when you've got something, and we probably all do, because we're all fallible creatures here, so it doesn't matter who you are in the marriage relationship, you'll fit in this category. We've got someone who's just not totally there, who's just not totally up to par, then gives you satisfaction. If you're like me, it gives you satisfaction. Here's something that's not, quote, worthy, unquote. And I'm not myself, and you're not either. Here's something not worthy, and I have the privilege of loving this anyway. You really get more out of that when you think about it. God gets a lot out of loving us when we're not worthy of His love. To love the angels, well, he loves the angels, but they don't ever do anything that's bad. So it's pretty easy to love the angels. See, they're perfect. They hearken to God's commands at his very beckoning. We don't. So we're a little more difficult to tame. So it takes a little more to control us. It takes a little more to have a relationship with us. We're more complex than the angels. I think the Bible clearly teaches that. We're more complex. They don't even understand what we have called salvation. 1 Peter chapter 1 teaches that. The angels desire to look into this business of salvation. Wow, we're more complex than the angels. They're greater in might, wisdom, power, strength, speed. They're greater in all of that. We're greater in personality, though. We're greater in personality. We have something they don't have. We're made in the image of God. They are not made in God's image. And we're more difficult to tame. And all of a sudden, you have a better relationship on your hands then. I don't know if you've ever read a book like David Wilkerson's A Cross and the Switchblade. There's an experience of some of these things I'm talking about here. And he got a lot of satisfaction out of reaching out to people that were not worthy of your reaching out to them. And when you reach out to them, they burn you. And then you just reach out again. That's what God does to us. And then they burn you again. You just reach out again. All of a sudden, they cannot get over the fact you're not going to leave them. You know, any normal foster home would have thrown you out on your ear when they caught you stealing the local china or the silverware. You would have gotten thrown out in a hurry. When they say, you can have the china. You took the silverware, take the china too. Sell it. Use the money yourself. Oh, what type of family is this? It's a family that has Christian love. David Wilkerson won over a lot of people with that expression, with that type of love. It's biblical love. He wasn't looking for what was worthy, and he wasn't looking with the love to possess idea. Where you can just let go of the person, you've got confidence in the fact that your love touched them to such a point, it can look like they're going to do something bad to you, but all of a sudden in the long run it turns out to be something good after all. I remember an account, as a matter of fact, in his book, now that I mentioned that, and you probably, if you've read this, will remember the same account, where in a crusade that he was having there, and a lot of these street thugs were out there to whom he had been doing a lot of witnessing, and it was time for the offering. And he was on stage and he invited them to take up the offering. What a step. You see, your actions speak louder than your words. He could go as a preacher and say, listen, I'm going to preach love to you guys. I love you guys. But if you can't demonstrate it, well, they're full of talk themselves. That's all they are, is talk, 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 talk. They're used to just talk. I love you guys here on the street and I want to help you. Well, then do something if you want to help us. So he let them take up the offering. And, it's a beautiful expression of his love and of his commitment to those young men. And they had to come all the way around the back of the auditorium, up through some stairs to get to him on the platform. They took up the offering. There was a lot of sneering and snickering and laughing going on and filling these hats up with money. And you know what they're going to do with that money? And then they disappear. And he tells the story. He waits a long time, and pretty soon here they come up the stairs. And what are they doing? They bring him all of the offering. Just incredible. Your love touched those people. Convince them that you're not a phony like so many of these religious people are out there. You're not a phony. You really mean what you're saying to them. Touch them, and of course you end up with Nicky Cruises and I don't know how many different people from a ministry like that. We better get back to the subject at hand here. These two characteristics are almost always seen with eros. Eros may take different forms, such as pure, lofty passion, the courtly love of the Middle Ages. That's a form of eros, not biblical love. The courtly love of the Middle Ages, whose characteristics, according to C.S. Lewis in his book, The Allegory of Love, I had to copy this down, it was so amusing. Courtly love, that's the knight in shining armor, the white horse and the woman, and drops her handkerchief and he picks it up for all of this. The courtly love of the Middle Ages. C.S. Lewis said it's characterized, whose characteristics may be enumerated as humility, courtesy, and adultery. Humility, really not humility. He's just play on terms there. Courtesy and adultery characterize the courtly love of the Middle Ages. He says also characterized by the religion of love. And what he means is courtly love there. Or eros can even go so far as to be nothing but base lust. James Moffat, in his book Love in the New Testament, page 38, suggests furthermore that this is an additional reason, perhaps, why the New Testament could never use eros, because it can mean just base lust. Its meaning had been so compromised with its association with sensuality. James Moffat's book, Love in the New Testament, is one of the chief books from a Christian author on love as well, and I was giving you a reference from page 38. Twice eros appears in the LXX. Proverbs chapter 24 and verse 51. Both of these are in Proverbs, by the way. Twice it appears in the LXX. Proverbs 24:51, which is different than what you would probably have in your Bible, so you don't really need to turn to it, because I doubt you'll find that many verses in any chapter in the book of Proverbs, for that matter. And if you look in chapter 7 and verse 18, here we can find it. LXX is a little bit different. Instead of 24:51, you'd really find it over in 30:16. But anyway, we're going to look in 7:18. Here's where you can find one time where the translators of the Septuagint took this Greek term to fit in this passage, and I think it fits well here. You would have to go all the way back to verse 6. I looked out the window of my house, beheld among the simple ones a young man void of understanding, and he went past the harlot's corner, remember, chapter on prostitution, adultery. And then she grabs him, says, I've decked my bed with coverings and perfumed it. And so, verse 18, come, let us take our fill of eros, according to the LXX. Until the morning, let us solace ourselves with loves. Well, that's just base lust. That's prostitution. That's adultery. It's fornication. For the goodman is not at home. He's gone on a long journey. So that's probably a good place for it to be used. And so notice, LXX, that's several centuries BC now, or a century or two BC. Eros had the notion, it could have the notion of nothing but base lust. Another thing I've copied down, I've done so much reading on love. Some of this, most of what I give you is obviously my own. You can tell when I'm giving you something from someone else because I'm saying I'm quoting them or someone has said. But I thought this statement was very interesting, that Paul's praise of love in 1 Corinthians 13, that almost could be entitled In Praise of Love. Paul's praise of love in 1 Corinthians 13 is the New Testament's answer to Plato's eulogy of Eros, Symposium 197. He actually eulogizes Eros as being something that's worthy in Symposium 197. So this author said that Paul's In Praise of Love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, would be the New Testament's answer to Plato's In Praise of romantic - sexual love in Symposium 197. Let's go on and do one other term because it's a very brief term. That will save for us our big terms to look at next time, or begin looking at next time. We certainly won't get through with them because there will be a lot to say. Well, let's do some erasing. We'll go down to, we've given you these characteristics, so I'll just give you a number 3 for our Greek terms. Epithumia is another Greek term for love. Epithumia, epithumia. Epithumia. In Greek, it means strong passion or desire. Okay, generally, it's used in Greek writings as the word to refer to outright sexual lusts. Eros can mean that, it came to mean that, but the chief term to use is epithumia if you're wanting to speak of outright sexual lust. Now, the point I want to make again is the same point I've made earlier. The eros term is not the bad, naughty, dirty term. If we're going to have a dirty term, and then I'm going to have to clarify that here in a moment, because even epithumia is really not a dirty term because it can mean other things. But if we're going to have one between among any of the Greek words, or between eros and epithumia, it would have to be epithumia and not eros. It and its cognates appear 55 times in the New Testament. So finally we're to a word that appears with some regularity in the New Testament. It and its cognates appear 55 times in the New Testament. And 46 of these have a bad connotation as lust or covet or concupiscence. All of those words come from epithumia, which means a strong passion or desire. And it is the word, if you need a word to speak of sexual lust, this would be the word to generally use in ancient Greek, epithumia. Although if you're using it, you're not necessarily needing to have a word for sexual lust. So it's translated sometimes as lust, covet in the KJV, or as concupiscence. The word love is never used as a translation. We're looking at it as a love term because it could speak of sexual love-lust, but really it's not a love term, it's a lust term, or really it's a passion, it's a desire term. So it's never translated as love in the New Testament. Let's look at some places where it's used. Matthew chapter 5. Look at a couple bad ones here. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 28. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her, epithumia, to have a strong passion or desire, hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. So he didn't say there's anything wrong with looking at a beautiful woman and commenting on the fact she's beautiful. God must have made her that way. Because lust doesn't mean look. Lust means to have strong passion or desire, because that's what the word means, epithumia. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman with strong passion and desire for her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. You know, you can get these really fanciful, hyper notions about the blind Pharisee that runs into the wall and bashes a skull because he wears a mask because he's afraid that if he looks at a woman he might lust after her. Well, you're really a religious soul to do something like that, but you're pretty foolish at the same time. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 6 will be another of the 46. We're obviously not going to look at those, just 2, and leave 44 alone, times where it appears in the New Testament with a bad connotation. Now these things were our examples to the intent that we should not, epithumia, lust after evil things, as they also lusted. Well, what happens in the other 9 places? 46 times is negative, it appears 55 total. The other 9 places, it either appears as a neutral or as a positive term. It still means strong passion or desire. But in 9 of the 55 times, It's either neutral or positive. By neutral, I mean no one's lusting after anything they shouldn't be lusting after. Okay, Matthew chapter 13 and verse 17. Really, you could almost say positive, because these things are going to be positive here. But neutral in that it doesn't put into gear the wrong types of passions or desires. Nothing wrong with passion, there's nothing wrong with desire. But there are wrong types and wrong types of expressions. Verily I say unto you that many prophets and righteous men have desired, have had a strong passion or desire to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them. It's the same term, epithumia. It's the term for sexual lust, but that's obviously not a good translation here. Just desire would be fine, or strong desire would even be better. Luke 22:15. Isn't this the passage where he said, with desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer? Luke 22:15. And he said unto them, with desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. Luke 22:15. So there's a positive sense of the negative term, the dirty term, epithumia. Philippians 1:23. For I am in a strait betwixt two, having a strong passion to depart and to be with Christ, which is far better. Having a desire to depart and to be with Christ, nevertheless to abide in the flesh is more needful for you. So here's just one of many cases where you don't want to be so stupid in translation that you say we have to have the same word to translate the same Greek word all the time, or Paul would have to be talking about sexual lust here, and that just wouldn't fit at all. It means a strong passion or desire. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 12, which I've alluded to already earlier in the message. Unto whom it was revealed that not unto themselves, but unto us they did minister, the prophets, the Old Testament prophets, the things which are now reported unto you by them which have preached the gospel unto you with the Holy Spirit sent down from heaven, which things the angels have a strong desire and passion to look into. They're not passive about it, they are passionate in their desire to understand the message of Christianity. And they only should be. They're God's holy and good creation. Now, whether they will ever understand it's another matter, but they do certainly have a strong desire to understand it. And here we are, just simple human beings, fallen creatures, and we know more than they know. We know more in the comprehension. They know more. They could speak in any language of the world they wanted to because they're spirit and we're flesh. But we know more. We know God. We comprehend things. We've experienced things in the redemptive work of Christ. And that's basically what I'm talking about, that they've never experienced. Of course, they've experienced things we've never experienced, like they've been around since the day one. There are no new angels. There aren't born. There aren't a mother and a father angel. They start way back in Genesis chapter 1, and they've been here. They could tell us all the history of the globe, you know. But I'd rather know what I know. We know the saving work of Jesus Christ than what they know. We'll find out what they know one day, you see. If we want to know history, we can either study it or find out in the next life. But they'll never experience what we've experienced in our redemption. And a final passage, 1 Timothy 3:1. Where he said it's good for a man to desire the office of the bishop. Not just desire it, well, I could take it or leave it. What's the term? Epithumia. This is a true saying. If a man have a strong passion after the office of the pastor, then he's passionate after the right thing, a good work, epithumia. You see, just in telling you a little definition of the term desire, it means more than our term desire. Our term desire can kind of mean, well, I kind of want it, but I don't really care one way or the other, but I kind of desire it. Well, that's not epithumia. It's a strong desire. So epithumia is really not an important word for love in Greek, rather for lust, and it's a much worse word than eros in most of its connotations. 46 out of 55 in the New Testament, it's negative as lust, covet, or concupiscence. But we have to look at it simply because it does appear among love terms, even though it itself is not one as such.